How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of The Mindful Hunter. I'm your host, as always, Jay Nickel. And today we are going to do a side-by-side comparison of the Outdoorsmans pan head against the Sirui VA-5 fluid pan head. Now, before we dive into the details of each of these, I want to point out why this might be an interesting comparison. Because one might say, you know, with the Outdoorsmans almost being twice the cost of the Sirui, why would you look at these two? And with the Sirui being fluid, when the Outdoorsmans isn't, why would you want to compare these two? And I think sometimes it's actually more interesting to compare items that have a few fundamental differences because they essentially go about solving the same problem, but in a different way. And I'm going to cut right to the punch. I'm not going to come out and say that either one of these tripods heads is better than the other tripod head. What I will say though, and we'll dive into the details of why I believe this to be the case, each of these is better suited to different applications and different budgets. And I'll get into why that is the case. So first of all, let's start with the Outdoorsmans. Now I'll say right out of the gate, this is my favorite workhorse of a tripod head. This is the one I've had the longest. I've owned this particular tripod head for 5 years. I've taken it on dozens of hunts, from, you know, the hot climates of Arizona to goat hunts in the Pacific Northwest in British Columbia. It's been frozen, it's been burnt, it's been wet, it's been full of dust. I have literally beat the shit out of this tripod head and it still works flawlessly to this day. That's the one thing that I'm going to say out of the gate about the Outdoorsman's gear. The craftsmanship, the attention to detail, and the service is just phenomenal across the board. I have nothing but good stuff to say about that whole crew of guys down there and everything that they're putting out. So this retails for $440 US and it weighs 10.5 ounces. You're going to get a full 360-degree rotation. It will support spotting scopes up to 95 millimeters with, I would say, moderate balancing capabilities. It's not a fluid head, but the machining tolerances are so tight that if you really take time dialing in the adjustments with the pan and the tilt, you can get it to feel like a fluid head. The locking mechanisms for the two axes, pan and tilt, are extremely firm. This is probably my favorite thing about this particular head. Like when you lock down tilt, you get zero tilt movement. And when you lock down pan, you get zero pan movement. That's one of the issues I have with the Sirui that we'll get into in a minute. Now, the reason I bring that particular feature up is that is actually the element that makes this best for my particular style of glassing. I find there's two approaches to glassing. One is more of like, keep your eyes locked in the center of your glassing device and then move the glassing device around in a more fluid manner. Or what I like to do is like the lock and grid mechanism. So I will go to a spot, lock my binoculars down, and then I look all around inside my field of view for like 20, 30 seconds. And then leaving the tilt locked, I'll open up the pan, pick something in the right field of view, and pan my binoculars over until that object is just in the left field of view. So then I know I've got a little bit of overlap between my two scenes, if you will. Then I lock that pan back down, and I do that same kind of looking around inside the glass. And then I lock and scan, unlock, move, lock, scan, unlock, move. I like that method because it's methodical, it slows me down, and it really gives me confidence that I've seen every square inch of ground. Now, that's not the first thing I'm gonna do when I get to a location. I'm gonna go to my hot spots first and do like a quick glass. But once I'm done my quick glass and I sit down to grid everything in front of me, I do that lock and scan style movement. And that's why this particular head for me is the superior head, and it's the one I like the best. Also, realistically, for the level of functionality this brings at 10.5 ounces, it's the lightest tripod head on the market. You could get a ball head, but again, because you don't have two separate axes to lock down, I find for any type of gridding, a ball head is rather inferior. I'm not saying you can't use one. I have used one on occasion, and I think for different circumstances, they can get the job done. But when you want a more fully featured tripod head that's going to enable you to use different styles of glassing, for example, I really believe that there's really no other lighter option on the market that can compete with this when it comes to quality and feature set. So now we're going to move over to the Sirui. The Sirui retails for $165 US, and it weighs 21 ounces, which is rather comical because you'll note that the Outdoorsman weighed 10.5. So it weighs exactly twice. However, we need to put this in context. 21 ounces is still extremely light for a fluid head of this quality. And I will say, if you're looking for the best value on the market, or if budget is a constraint, hands down, the VA-5 is going to win all day. Again, you're going to have a full 360 degrees of rotation, pan lock, tilt lock, a bubble on the scope, which is quite helpful. Now, as I mentioned about the feature set that I liked about the Outdoorsmans being the ability to really lock down the pan and tilt axes independently, that's my issue with the VA-5. You can crank these things down and there will still be some movement if you apply enough pressure. And if you just do them finger tight, if you have the spotting scope a little unbalanced, or if you're at a severe angle, you will be able to watch the head slowly tilt. The reason this is an issue for me is that, for example, when I find an animal, I want to lock down my scope. Then maybe I'm going to go grab my phone scope or something else, or I'm going to go grab my buddy and I'm going to bring him back. Sometimes you're going to bump your glassing device on the way. You know, lots of times when you're in the backcountry, you kind of got your tripod like tangled up in your legs and you're sitting cross-legged on some weird hill. And on several occasions, I've had an animal in my field of view. I have thought I locked down the VA-5, and then through the process of getting up or walking away or coming back, I would notice that my spotting scope had slowly tilted and the animal was no longer in the field of view. Listen, it's not the end of the world, but it is just something I want to note because it is such an important feature set for me with the way that I glass. Now, if you're the more put the eyes in the middle of your binos and move things around fluidly, the VA-5 is going to beat the Outdoorsman's pan head all day. And here's why. Because it's a fluid head, it has greater tensile adjustability. What I mean by that is, even though there's some leeway with the axes on the pan head, like you can partially lock it down and still get like a smooth panning motion that will resist some of the weight of the glasses, realistically, once you start getting into bigger binos and bigger spotting scopes, as soon as you open up, they tend to dump one way or another. Because this is a fluid head, you can kind of partially open it and it will apply a great deal of tension. And especially with the longer tripod head handle, that glass, if it's well balanced, won't move until you start to apply pressure. So you can really, leave the pan and tilt adjustments alone and slowly look around your field of view, assuming everything is well balanced. You cannot do that with the Outdoorsman's pan head, at least not without being very, very finicky. And even though it says it will support up to 95mm scopes, the Outdoorsman's pan head, and I run my Zeiss Harpy 95 on there just fine, you do essentially need to have it locked down, or you need to have both your hands on it, because it's not really built to kind of have it halfway open and do that smooth panning. Now, maybe with the addition of a balance rail, that would help. But I just want to point this out because the Sirui is far superior in that particular characteristic. Now, for attachment systems, you can use whatever you want on either of these. I use Outdoorsmans mounting systems on everything I own. So I just apply one of their quick adapters to the plate that comes, I think it's a TY70A plate that comes in the Sirui. I put the Outdoorsmans quick adapter, and then my glass can go back and forth. So real quick recap, if money is the single most important factor, go with the VA-5. If weight is the single most important factor, go with the Outdoorsmans Panhead. If you got a little bit of money and you are slowly starting to build up a catalog of gear in your house, get both. This is why I got both. I think these are very complementary scopes. For example, I own a tall and a medium compact tripod from Outdoorsmans. When I go bear hunting in the spring, I mount the VA-5 on my tall. I use that for all my truck glassing and all my short walk-ins. And then I put the Outdoorsmans Panhead on my compact medium. And then that way, anytime I go in for a hike or go into the backcountry, I've got the lightweight option. And then anytime I'm at the road or have the luxury of standing up while I'm glassing, I've got the more heavier, kind of more luxurious option. So I do think that they pair with each other very well. And it does save you a little bit of money and give you a little bit of more versatility in your tripod head attachment selection options. All right, that's about all I've got on these two particular heads. I've owned them both for quite a while. I'm very happy with them both. I think they do a great job, just in a different way. And please let me know if I can be of any more help. You can either drop a question in the comments below or shoot me an email, jay@mindfulhunter.com. And if you could take a moment to engage with the content, share, subscribe, like, pass it on to a friend, I would greatly appreciate it. As always, thanks for tuning in.